I know, I'm not going to say I hope, I know that when you leave here at the end of this session, you will know a lot more about things you did not know about. And I can't say good, bad, or ugly, but you will know more. So I am Gloria Holmes. The short version, I'm an educator, a writer, a grandmother, a resident of Hilton Head, and I am a Gullah woman with Gullah ancestry in Charleston and in Georgetown, South Carolina. The interesting thing for me is that my aunts, when I was a child, growing up in New York, born in Harlem on Lenox Avenue, my aunt used to say, I'm a Geechee. I'm a Geechee. But no one in my family ever said to me what that meant. It just never happened. It began to become clearer to me in the last 5 or 6 years through my work in this community, as well as through my daughter. Some of you have heard her speak. Her name is Luana Gray Sellers, and she's done a lot of speaking around the area. But Luana's work has opened up the world of Gullah history to me and to my family. So with that said, I will also say that part of the reason that Blake White, our artistic director, asked me to do this is because I actually wear 2 hats. One hat that I wear is that I was, until past December, a member of the board of Mitchelville. And I was in that capacity for 2 terms, and when that expired, I rolled off the board. So I continue, for the love of Mitchelville, to wear that hat. The other reason I'm standing here is because I am now on the board of the Lean Ensemble. So in some ways, I felt in the last 2 months that represents a kind of schizophrenia. I feel like I'm losing my mind at times. In any case, I feel that I am kind of well positioned to talk about Mitchelville and Lean Ensemble and this production. So basically, you're here today because Lean Ensemble has a production coming up on March 16th, running through March 26th, called Mitchelville. And many of you have already purchased tickets. As it happens, we are, at least 2 of the 8 performances are sold out. So that is just to say, if you would like to come, I urge you to not wait to purchase your tickets. So I'm also a carnival barker. And in case you were unaware, the performances are at the Main Street Theater on Main Street here in Hilton Head. So I want to give you a little background of Lean, only because I think it fits the larger story. And I thought about this, all of what I'm going to say, a lot, because I could have just jumped into panel discussion. But I chose not to do that because there are a couple of intersecting things going on here, and I want you to have a good sense of what they are. First of all, the Lean Ensemble is a regional theater, and it has, well, I'm not 100% sure about this, Mila, but I did my homework, and I know the first performance was in 2015. Is that accurate? Okay. So the first performance of Lean, or the first production, was in 2015. I came on within the last 2 years, and one of the things that attracts me to Lean is that it has made a concerted effort to do, one, community outreach, to address issues of diversity and difference in an open, constructive way through drama. And it's, when I say diversity, please don't presume I'm simply talking about race, because that is a very narrow and really ignorant way of looking. No, really, I'm an educator. So it really is an ignorant way to think of the term diversity. So the kind of diversity that Lean has addressed deals with all kinds. And the upcoming play, Ripcord, following Mitchelville, deals with that differently as well. But one of the things from my vantage point as a Black woman about being part of the Lean family is that they are talking about addressing issues of race and equality differently and in very constructive ways. That is why about 5 years ago, I think it was 2017, the Lean board decided, you know, we're in Hilton Head. There's a history right here under our feet. It is a gold mine, and it can reflect, or it can be reflected through art, through drama. So what they did, and Blake, please correct me if I'm wrong, Blake in the black shirt is the artistic director of Lean. I think in 2017, the idea of commissioning a play about the history of Mitchelville came to be. And that's why it fit their mission as a theater group to deal with diversity. It fit their mission to be an outreach, or to do outreach to the community. It fit their mission to honor the history of Native Islanders who are still here. So that is how Lean came to be. The board members for Lean, a few of them are here, and I will try to make sure I don't miss anyone. Myla is the chair of the board. Myla. Mayor. Cynthia Thompson, who is like, and then, as I said, that is Blake White, the artistic. All right, so now I've given you a sense of Lean and why we have a play called Mitchelville. Now I want to tell you a little bit about the town of Mitchelville. Just a little bit, because I am not an historian. But before the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, Hilton Head was the home of the first freedmen who had a self-sustaining, self-governing town in this country. It is called Mitchelville. And guess what? It's on Beach City Road and in our surrounding area. So Mitchelville is part of our very deep history. And it is part of our history in a really important and significant way. In 2005, a group of people, a racially diverse group of people who were also gender diverse, decided that they were going to revive the history that was here around us. And they started talking about it. And I learned this from my friend, Dot Law, who was among those at the beginning. Dot, please stand up. Because what I found that is really important, even though I had been on the board of Mitchellville, and now we call it Historic Mitchellville Freedom Park. It's on Beach City Road. One of our panelists sitting right there, Lola Campbell, is the present chair of Mitchellville. Okay. The reason I wanted to talk a little bit about Mitchellville from a historical perspective is that the idea that, well, originally when the idea for a project around that history came up, it was called Mitchellville Preservation Park, MPP, project, Mitchellville Preservation Project. Black people and white people came together, and I learned this from God, that in Charleston in 2005, someone had the idea that they should have a ball to celebrate the Confederacy in Charleston. So think about that, a Confederacy gala in Charleston. The reaction to that in Hilton Head was that this group sort of formed informally and said, you know, we need to respond to that in some visible way, which they did. That was the origin of the idea that became Historic Mitchellville Freedom Park right now. And because I am, that strikes me on a number of levels. One, that it was a diverse group. It was a diverse group of men and women, which says to me that our history, the Gullah history, the not Gullah history, is everybody's history. And it is symbolic to me that white people and black people came together to form the idea of Mitchellville as we know it. Not the town, but the entity that exists. So I'm going to name those people because I think certainly in African culture, as long as you name someone, they're still alive. Among those people, Emery Campbell, Louise Cohen, who is sitting in the back. Louise, could you stand up, please? Everybody. Ruth Germany, Dot Law, whom you just saw, Louise Lawrence, who was a local historian, James and Johnny Mitchell, Peter Oven, Michael Taylor, Ben and Donna Williams, and Charles Young. Those were the people who came together in an interracial group in 2005 to bring us to where we are today. And to be honest, if they didn't do that in 2005, there would be no play. Yes. Really, there would be no play, and we would not have Mitchellville Freedom Park right now, in my opinion. All right, so I'm taking the time to do this because I think it's important for you to know this. This play, written by this man, whom I will introduce formally in a minute, Orrin Squire, is a work of historical fiction. The characters are composites and archetypes meant to represent the complexities of this history. The play is a creative rendering of history. The major goal is to honor and important living history that is an integral part of Hilton Head community and really of the Low Country. I read the article, and I know that some of you already took it, but if you have not yet gotten and taken a look at the most recent issue of Local Life, on page 152, there is an interview with Orrin Squire, the playwright.
Done by the
The author of the article is here, and she interviewed Orrin. At the end of that article, Orrin said, quote, "Mitchelville is not like a documentary, but hopefully it's fiction that is honoring a deeper truth." Okay? All right, so now I'm going to introduce the panel. Okay. All right, so I'm going to start with Alex Brown. I'm doing this alphabetically. Alex Brown is probably known to most of you. First of all, he's a councilman here on the town. So Alex is an 8th generation Native Islander. Think about that. For 8 generations, and he's in a green shirt. Alex is a member of the town council representing Ward 1. And that one has the highest concentration of Gullah families on the island. In addition, he's vice president of operations for Resort Retail Associates. Alex is a community activist who is deeply involved in the Hilton Head community and works tirelessly on behalf of the Gullah community. He's part of the Gullah leadership group. He's worked with the MLK Commission. He's been on part of the GIC organization. He was part of the Council Vision and Steering Committee, and he has demonstrated pride in his family, his culture, and love of this entire island. So please give Alex a hand. Lola, whom I referred to before, her name is Oma Lola, but she allows us to call her Lola. She is a sixth generation Native Islander. She is a lawyer, a writer, an entrepreneur. She has a gift store called Vinya, right on Spanish Wells. Okay. She was born into one of the oldest Native families. One of her ancestors was enslaved in Hilton Head in 1861 when the Union Army captured Hilton Head. Think about that. Think about that in terms of her love of this ground where we are, or her attachment to it. 1861. And her grandfather was Solomon Campbell, and he was one of the early craftsmen who built boats and houses in Hilton Head. Okay? Her latest writing or book that she published is called Writings on the Wall, Poetic Words from My Soul. So you will have seen, I'm sure, Lola's work in Local Life several times. In February edition, she's also in this edition. February
and last February.
Last February. And she is a poet, and God bless you too. The other panelist, whose arms are crossed right there, that's Herbert Ford, a family friend, and I think family, is a 5th generation Native Islander. He worked for the federal government in Washington for 29 years before retiring and returning to Hilton Head. And he is a tireless community activist. Herbert is involved in so many things. He was, he's on the board of directors of Mitchelville right now. He's on the board of the Heritage Library. He's part of the Low Country Gullah Foundation. And he was a commissioner for PSD for I don't know how many years. So he's been very involved in this. Are you not happy about that? All right, 12 years. All right, so please give Herbert for the. And finally, as far as our local people, is Galen Miller, who is on that end. Galen is a 5th generation Native Islander who grew up on Hilton Head. For the last 12 years, he's been the IT director at the Cypress, okay? In addition, he's an entrepreneur. He has his own IT company. He is chair of the MLK committee. So the activities that many of you attended for Martin Luther King's Day at the high school, and you had a pickup on the beach, cleanup on the beach.
Cemetery cleanup.
Cemetery cleanup. All of that was part of the work of Galen Miller. Please give him a. And so now I want to tell you who the creative persons are. Orrin, who is sitting to my right, and I have to tell you, I had to cut down the work. So forgive me for leaving out things that you might have wanted me to talk about. But Orrin is an award-winning playwright, reporter, and multimedia artist. He's received honors from Lincoln Center, the Royal Court Theatre in London, the National Black Theatre, the Dramatists Guild of America, and the Brooklyn Arts Exchange. And that's just a small amount. In 2018-19, he had 6 productions: Chicago, North Carolina, Seattle, Dallas, and Miami. And he just told me he's leaving here in a couple of days to go to Miami and back, and he will go back. So he's very active, very involved. He's been an independent reporter. He's written for the Miami Herald, the Chicago Tribune, the New Republic, ESPN, Talking Points, Memo, Fusion, and many other publications. He wrote Dreams of Freedom, which is a multimedia video about Jewish immigrants in the 20th century for the National Museum of American Jewish History in Philadelphia. It won 3 National Museum Awards. His TV credits include being a writer for the CBS political satire, Brain Dead, and the NBC family drama, This Is Us, which many of you have been fans of. In addition, he's a producer and a writer for the CBS show The Good Fight and the supernatural drama Evil. Please give Orrin. And next to Orrin is Caesar Williams. And he, too, is award-winning. He's an award-winning director. He won an Obie Award as the artistic director of the play Fire This Time. Some of his other directorial credits include the off-Broadway premiere of Dancing on Eggshells, Till, a musical, Serving Elizabeth, Sweat, The October Storm, and The Hunting Season, which received the Planet Connections Award for Best Direction. In addition to his directing credits, he is an actor. His TV credits include appearances on Bull, Shades of Blue, Law and Order, The Enemy Within, and Blue Bloods. He is also an adjunct professor of acting at the State University of New York, Purchase. Okay, please give them down. So I, being the writer, had some questions in mind, and I've changed everything. So I'm going to ask Warren and Caesar the first question, and it's generic enough. What is your vision for Mitchellville? And we're going to elaborate and pull that apart a little later, but can you say something about your vision for the play in general?
Do you need the mic? I don't think I need the microphone. I can project. Well, but maybe, we'll see. If people can't hear me in the back, let me know. When this project started in 2017, I just thought it was going to be a historical work of fiction. I've worked before on projects about Nueva Canción, the Salvador Allende, and the freedom movement of song in South America, Nueva Canción. I've done projects about the Cambodian killing fields and that issue, and crypto converso Jewish families in Albuquerque. So when I first began this project, I did what I usually do. I start diving into the language, the music, the food, the mysticism that I can find for inspiration. And then as I started doing that, I started discovering more and more about my family's history on my mom's side, and it started to shift away from just being historical fiction and being a way to incorporate the music, the movement, the song, and the history in these stories. And then my sort of rediscovering, yeah, my Apple's doing that too, and rediscovering what that process would be like if you did not know you were from here, or to what extent you'd have to go through, and finding sort of that strand in the contemporary culture with land rights, and people losing their land, people trying to keep their land, and taxes, with the history in the 1800s. So it was trying to do this fusion of something happening in contemporary times that allows us to go back into the 1800s, create a fiction, and a way to examine these different issues that are going on, and how history begins to complicate itself the more you dive into it and the more it becomes personal.
I'm going to come back to that present, past kind of thing, because I think that's really important. Caesar, I would like to ask you the same question from your vantage point as a director, because it's similar, there's a lot of overlap and a lot of difference between playwright and director. So could you talk a little bit about your vision for the play Mitchellville?
Yes, thank you. First, I'm so excited to see so many people in this room. It's awesome. I mean, I guess we've come a long way since COVID. As a director, my first job, second and third job is to serve the play and the playwright. So I echo everything that Oren said in terms of the importance of us being able to look at what's currently going on Hilton Head Island, in the South, and in this country, and then kind of relate it to something that's happened in our history. Because I think all things, especially in America, if you go back to slavery, you could pretty much explain every situation that's going on in this country at this time. And so an opportunity to take a story as beautiful as this, of people as beautiful as the Gullah people, and to tell this story is exciting to me, and that's what I'm hoping we can convey to the audiences.
I didn't ask them to say we were beautiful, but I liked them.
It's It's a fact, so we state facts.
I like that.
I'm gonna open that question. Does anyone else on the panel want to talk about either your vision or, your either preconceptions or hope for the play? All right,
Like
Ellen, please.
Let me know if you can't hear me. I'll try to project. So I do think that there are different ways to receive the information or education about the Gullah culture and about history. And I appreciate that we have different ways to tell it. Sitting on the Mitchelville board, we want to share the story of Mitchelville. We want everyone as far and wide to know about Mitchelville because we do feel like it's been the greatest untold story. But everyone doesn't receive the message in the same way, as I said, so it may be hard for people to understand it sometimes. It may be hard for you to understand it, but bringing it to the future or to the present, but also telling the story of the past, I think is just so innovative and really important because you have to remember that your audience is always going to be different. It's just like children learning in a classroom. One doesn't learn the same as the other. So I really appreciate that, Orrin has written this play and that Caesar will be directing it and getting it out there.
Does anybody else want to say anything?
I like that.
All right. Galen?
Hello, everybody. I would like to just add to say, me growing up on Hilton Head, my ancestors never talked about Mitchellville. I never heard about Mitchellville until probably maybe 10, 15 years ago. And to be a part of today, to really learn more about the history of my ancestors coming here to Hilton Head is pretty amazing to be a part of this. So I wanted to add that. But on top of that, kudos to these guys to putting in the work, understanding and gathering information about the history of Hilton Head and where our ancestors came here. So kudos. So thank you very much. And also thank you for the audience for being here. And like Herbie said, that so many people could be here today.
So, you kind of anticipated my next question, which I was really going to ask to the panel of Native Islanders. And that question is, does the play present specific or unique challenges? No, I'm sorry, that was the last question. To the Gullah panelists, does the idea of the play present special or unique thoughts or feelings to you because you are a Native Islander and it's your history that we're talking about? Did you have any particular feelings about that you are interested or willing to share? Does this play, did it unnerve you? Did you feel concerned?
I guess as the elder statesman of the panel there since that's okay. I wouldn't say that it evoked any special feeling on my part. As Gail indicated, I only became aware of Mitchelville in 2009 after retiring and spending 30 years representing my nation abroad. And returning to Hilton Head and being asked to be a part of the board of directors of an organization called Mitchelville. I retired on a Friday. I arrived from Hilton Head on a Saturday. And got asked on Sunday afternoon to be a part of Mitchelville, and I said, what is Mitchelville? Here I am, a 56-year-old man from here, and had never heard of this town called Mitchelville, even though I spent my entire life in the area called Mitchelville. Went to church, in that area, still go to church in that area, and all of my family members have always existed in that same community called Mitchelville, and I had never heard of it. It was embarrassing, but I told him, I said, look, my wife and I are getting ready to go on a 10-day Alaskan cruise. When I get back, we'll talk about Mitchelville then, but the most important thing for me is that, and I think Orange said this, a historical fiction. It's important to me that when folks think of Mitchelville, they have an accurate depiction of what Mitchelville is. Mitchelville, in my mind, as I said to Mr. Balmer, who asked me to be a part of it, Mitchelville is American history. It is not. And I think it's important for people to understand that there shouldn't be a distinction of African history or Mexican history. History is history. And it doesn't have any color attached to it. So Mitchelville is a part of all of our history, and it's important that all of us understand what Mitchelville is, what it represents, and the fact that it's a part of all of our history. Now, I think it's important that these two gentlemen who make an attempt to talk about this story called Mitchelville, that they make sure that they capture it as accurately as they possibly can. I'm hoping that, I haven't read the play, I haven't seen it. I'm looking forward to seeing it. From having side conversation with them, I think it will be an authentic play. The jury is out as to whether it's going to be an accurate depiction. I will find out. It just happened so that one of the ladies in my church will be 105 years old in this fall. And she grew up in Mitchelville. She understands Mitchelville, and she talks about Mitchelville all the time, even to this day. So you guys have a challenge in your hands. Just gonna let you know that there are folks who knew exactly what it was like to live in Mitchelville, and it means a lot to those folks who are of that generation that story is told accurately, and it's a story what folks have a lot of pride about, including myself, even though I didn't know about it until 2009. It's still a prideful story. It's one that I hope that all of you can appreciate and will be able to accept as reality.
Yes, thank you. Great day to everyone. Mr. Ford has already set rules of engagement. It is true in Gullah law that we have to let the elders go first. Don't make any moves until you have cleared it with the elders, which is a great foundation, actually, when you start to think about some of the history. The question around your feelings as far as the play is concerned, and I gotta tell you that there are mixed feelings for me. As Mr. Ford has alluded to, you never know if the story is going to be accurate, right? So that's one side of it. But the other side of it is, as Lola has mentioned earlier, this is opportunity, right? To highlight this part of history. And for me, history is a little different. We can arguably disagree on what happened in the past. But I am really concerned about the future. If my family's been here 8 generations, the attempt would be that we continue in perpetuity. So just highlighting Mitchelville, the story of Mitchelville, how it is an American story, how we can continue to coexist, to me, is the positive side of the feeling, okay? I have great anticipation as far as that's concerned, what will come of this story told to the world.
You know, one of the comments that I want to respond to, and it's something I've heard for the last 7 or 8 years that I've been living here full time. It should stun you all to hear people who are generationally rooted in this community to know that they did not know their history. And so then the question becomes, Why? Why not? And it kind of connects to the next question that I wanted to address that had to do with history. Because right now in 2023, the concept of history is being weighed and beat up and redefined and parsed, and there are history wars going on. So whose history is it? Is the kind of thing that I hear so much about. So I want you to see if you can connect that reality that Native Islanders lived here. Their mothers, fathers, grandfathers, 8 generations, 6, 5 generations here, and they didn't know about Mitchellville. For me, and I'm not a panelist, so I'll shut up in a second, but it's all about power. It's all about control. It's all about who is controlling the story, who is controlling the narrative. And so I'm not going to go on more because then it becomes a dissertation time. But anyway, so my question is for Oren and Caesar, and anyone can respond if you like. But the question is, did the current controversies about history, and I mean now, what it is, who should control it, how it should be taught, did any of that impact how you've imagined this play? And are there any particular issues about history that inspired you? So I'm into the kind of the history controversy question.
Well, on The Good Fight, there's someone on the production crew whose parents were involved with African American national landmarks and historic preservation sites, and they brought it to my attention very, very low amount of national and state, especially in the South, historic sites that are dedicated to African American culture. And then I found an article, I did research on that. I talked to this person's father, then I talked to other people, and it began to inform, before, this was 2018, my understanding of just how much of our history is hidden right in front of us, and how many sites there are throughout the South that could be understood, that could be enriched, that we can learn from, that are just hidden. So that was definitely, even back then in 2018, a point that I thought was important, a theme that I thought was important, that I forgot the percentage, something extremely low, like 3 or 4% of national sites are African American. And so understanding that and how that fits within Mitchellville, Hilton Head America, and how there are a group of activists who are trying to change that. And so that was one of the key points that I think is becoming more relevant now, that Black history is being reinterpreted as critical race theory, or being reinterpreted as these things that are dangerous for white kids to hear about. Meanwhile, mass shootings are fine, but white kids learning about slavery is going to traumatize them. And understanding that weird dynamic in America of how the reduction, the degradation, and the burying of Black history is a part of culture, while the outlying causes that we have in society can all be traced back to that thing that's underneath the ground. On The Good Fight, there was a lawyer, she's Canadian, very smart, went to Harvard, then went to Oxford, and we would talk about American law and these issues, and she would always get confused about the illogical rules in American law. And I told her, Tegan, a shortcut is, if it's illogical and it doesn't make sense, it was probably used to enslave or trap Black people. Whenever you see something that doesn't make sense, you went to Oxford, you went to Harvard, she's like, this law, and it usually is because Black people. And she applied that once. She's like, oh my God, you're right. As an outsider, as a white outsider from Canada, she's like, all these things that don't make sense that we list initially originate, including the clinics after the Civil War for abortions, to encourage people, since they were no longer considered property, to have abortions were traced back to the enslavement, the entrapment, the degradation, and the reduction of Black life and Black culture. And so this play, historical fiction, but it's one of the themes of that is sort of bringing that to light and having pride in it and having pride in rediscovering your own roots, and that it is a growing process. And the other thing is, like these historic sites, it's a living piece of art. I work in TV and film. Like we spoke over the phone, you shoot a TV film episode, it's stuck in amber, it's done with. The beauty of poetry, the beauty of theater, is that at least for me, when I work on stuff, it continues to grow and more. It isn't a log that goes into a fire that heats the room. It's a tree that continues to grow. And all I am is a gardener of that tree. I am not in control of it. I'm not saying, no, you go here. The gardener is just trying to nurture the tree and go where the branches go and to learn and understand.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Before Caesar gives his answer, I just want to reiterate the term historical fiction. Historical fiction, as opposed to documentary. This is not, the play Mitchelville is not a docudrama. It is historical fiction. It is rooted in Gullah history. It's rooted in the Gullah history that we know. But I love the idea that this is a living, growing, dynamic process.
It's almost like, cheesily enough, I'm not writing the play is writing me. And like the play is writing me, it's informing me, it's nurturing me, and taking me in areas I did not expect to go to. Like when I asked my mom, she revealed all this stuff about her possible Gullah roots and all these things that she started tracking that I did not know about until a few years ago, only by being here and asking her these questions.
Caesar, as you give your answer, was I correct that you said that you had Geechee roots in your family? Did I mishear that?
My family, we used to have our family reunions on Hilton Head Island. They made, this is a part of my family I don't really keep in touch with. Last time I was here was 25 years ago, and that's why I was interested. I never heard of Mitchelville. I must have been on this island, I don't know, 20 times growing up. Never heard of Mitchelville. So I don't know, I guess it's like Carter G. Woodson said, the easiest way to exterminate a people and their culture is to destroy their history.
Yeah.
And speaking of the historical fiction element of this story, I love the way that Oren is using it because there's a character or a force or an element in the play that acts as a prophet. And I call them a prophet because the character exists during the 1860s time, but they predict all of these things that will happen in America because, not just in America, but in the world. If you create something of value, people in power are either going to take it or destroy it. And so where we fictionalize the story of Mitchelville is we introduce a character which basically predicts what will come to be with Mitchelville, what will come to be with Seneca Village, what will happen with Black Wall Street, what will happen with Redwood, all these places in this country. So it's not accurate historically in terms of what happened specifically in Mitchelville, but what this character is fighting for, what this character is trying to warn us about, 100% happens in America all the time, and unfortunately will continue to happen.
Thank you. Thank
And I
you.
want to say it is fictional, but these debates were going on back then. I do not believe I'm smarter than my ancestors. The abolitionist debates I started studying while researching this, and it's the same debates we're having now. And it was the debates happening among white abolitionists, among Black abolitionists of this, do we fight or do we go peacefully towards freedom? And what is the best approach? And many people went back and forth on that answer.
Thank you. Thank you. Does anybody want to comment? Because it's open for you to respond to any questions. So I'm asking this of our local panelists. What are some of the values that you associate with being Gullah. That's kind of distinct. It's a Gullah value. I think, Mr. Ford, that when you were talking about the elder who is still alive and over 100, that you were speaking of Mother River. So I've heard her speak a number of times, and she's talked about the values she grew up with. So maybe those of you can talk about some of the values you have that you think are uniquely Gullah values.
I would, can everyone hear me? I would say, that probably, the number one value would be the appreciation for hard work. When I think about my dad and my mom and how they put themselves in a situation and worked exceptionally hard so that our family could have what they didn't have growing up. My dad was a first grade dropout. My mom probably dropped out of the elementary school. Dad would go to work and get off, and he would go to bed early, about 6:30 or 7 o'clock, and Mom would tell us to be quiet and don't make a lot of noise because Dad had to get some rest. And I didn't understand it at the time, but the reason Dad had to get some rest is because Dad had to get up about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning to go and pick oysters so that Mom would have something to do during the daytime to shuck those oysters so that she could bring in a source of income. And when Dad got off from picking oysters, he went to his regular job. So there was an appreciation for hard work. Everybody, in my experience, knew the value of hard work, and if you worked hard, you would get rewarded. The other value that was extremely important in my family's life is Christianity. Mitchelville had the first African-American church here on the island. And that respect for Christianity has stemmed the tide from that time until today, and it continues to today. My family has a great appreciation for the value of living a Christian life. And so those would be probably two biggest values that I would think would be something that's important to, at least to my Gullah family. And I can't speak for the others because they're from a different generation. I'm a tad bit older than them. But hard work, the appreciation for hard work, respect for the law, and Christianity, those would be the three that would be integral to my family and our Gullah way of living.
So I echo Herbie on those two components, but I'll add to that. Me growing up here on Hilton Head was probably a little bit different. Family, the appreciation for your family, spending time with your family, learning your family. But not only that component, the unity within our community was huge back then. We have lost a little of that. We have lost the sense of community as a whole from my perspective and what I'm seeing from where we grew up. You could not say, Mr. Frage, I couldn't help you with something. The community helped Mr. Frage with something. Mr. Cohen, you need help in your field, your tractor isn't working today. Mr. Cohen, the community was coming out there to help. That's the values that I learned here on Hilton Head. Working hard. When you talk about working hard, my grandfather, he was a longshoreman. Other Savannah, he would leave 3 o'clock in the morning, go along Sherman, and come home, and he's in the field setting the garden ready to be planted with vegetables we're gonna eat. Or raising hogs and chickens so we can have meat on the table. So when I think about the value, I think about those components, and those are components I have lived by. Those are the components that I try to teach my kids today about unity and about being a family and about approaching everybody with the same value that you would want somebody to have. So that's my point.
I would echo both of those sentiments, and I think hard work brings resourcefulness, and so I feel like resourcefulness is one of the unique describers of the Gullah community. And I'm an entrepreneur, and I said to myself, I think I've said this to you before, Gloria, that whether our ancestors were forced to be entrepreneurs or not, like my grandfather was an entrepreneur, great-grandfather, aunts, uncles, and I just think sometimes maybe they didn't have the opportunity to be anything other than that.
Don't forget about your dad. He was an
Oh, my dad, too. Sorry, skip that generation. My dad, too, of course. He was a great entrepreneur. So when I think of being a Gullah person, I just think, community, a village, trust, because we can't trust everyone these days, actually. But when I listen to the stories that Father and others have told me, they always trusted. All the families trusted each other, and that's because they had to help each other out. My 15th cousin is just my cousin, not my 15th, or, in other communities, I believe that's not the same. Mm-hmm. When I went away to live in New York City, I saw a difference of how people grew up. I was proud that I had grown up in the Gullah community because I don't think I would be able to work as hard as I have. I continue to get the question from people, how do you do everything that you do? And sometimes I start questioning myself, like, well, maybe I'm doing too much, because I'm not feeling that I'm doing too much. I'm feeling that I have obligations, and that I need to do what I'm doing. So, how have I been able to do that? With the strength that growing up in this community has given me. We're unique, and I know Gloria actually challenged me and said, well, growing up in New York, she felt the same way. Because there people down the street helped her out, or the family here and there. Well, I would say it all came from the Gullah community.
I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, so community, village, trust.
Yeah, we adopted you, Gloria.
That's the first time Herbert Ford has said something nice like that. I've challenged Herbert, not Herbie, but I've challenged him to say that our surnames in our families are Ward, W-A-R-D, in my family, and in his too.
Exactly.
And I said to Herbert one day, so Herbert, what would you do if we're related? And Herbert said, I'd kill myself.
Don't laugh at that.
You talk about hard work. I'm sure many of us can relate to the hard work. I'm not quite sure how I got past the first grade because as I would come home from school, get off the bus, I had to walk past my grandfather who was in the field as his evening job. He was a landscaper during the day, when I was coming up. I would have to go inside the house, change my clothes, come help them in the field before I could do my homework. Okay? So I do share the whole idea behind work ethic. But I also wanted to add, there's a key component when it comes to the culture that we all cherish. That's the land. I know many of us that are in this room came to Hilton Head and purchased a lot. I'm not sure that I've ever referred to our family compound as a lot. It is our land. And it's going back to the African culture where God has blessed us with this land. It is our responsibility to keep it. I was sharing with my sons a few weeks ago as we were on our way to the town hall to go through the design studio. Thank you, Mr. Orlando, for launching that. And I gave them a quick history lesson of my great-great-grandfather who was enslaved here on Hilton Head, was able to purchase land with his pension from fighting in the Civil War. 79 acres is what he owned. His horse and buggy were worth more than the 79 acres. The horse and buggy are long gone. We're holding on to the land because, as Lola has said, Gullah folks were entrepreneurs on their land. That's the only way that you could survive. And as I said earlier, let's not forget that this culture is alive and well. And the land is a key component of that. The ability to self-sustain yourself on your land is a key component of that. So I just offer the land as a key component of this culture and what's significant to us as we move forward.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll say this out loud. When Mr. Ford was talking about hard work and everyone reiterated it, I remembered that hard work was also part of my family. But when my daughter did the ancestral research and our family tree is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, we too have an ancestor who was here on Hilton Head, who joined the Union Army and fought back. So he had been enslaved, he self-emancipated, he came here, he joined the Union Army. When he left the Army, he owed them about $37, which I'm still expecting somebody to But the other thing that I'm reminded of when I heard you talk about hard work is that my daughter Luana also found in our family tree that one of my ancestors was listed as a huckster. I don't know what that means. So I want to ask, I have two questions that are kind of hard, and if they challenge you in a way you don't want to deal with, I understand. But it's the teacher in me, so forgive me. And I'm asking this of everyone, so anyone can feel free to respond. But Gullah people bear the ancestral memory of slavery and enslavement. Does this have an impact on Gullah people and culture in the present, in your opinion? Like intergenerational trauma? Is that a valid thought?
I'll take a step.
Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Holmes, for the introduction earlier. This feeds into your question. today, I'm gonna be just Ellen today, all right? Councilman Ames, all right? That is the Gullah dialect of Alex, and
I have to say, I always thought that was his name until later on in life.
I agree. But to your question, and some have not heard this story, but when I showed up to grade school, the teacher called the roll, she pronounced my name as Alex. I didn't know who that was. Okay? So, and from that day on, I almost had to live two lives, right? And Alex. And I think there is some trauma there coming out of slavery, okay? And, you know, I've said out loud to folks that don't look like me, and I'm not quite sure that they really understand what I've said, which is, I'm proud of slavery. I mean, that's not something that I want to run away from. That's not something that I want anybody to have discomfort in. But instead, let's talk about what has happened since then. My ancestors would have never thought that I would be sitting here today doing this in front of all of you. Yeah. So yeah, there's a trauma that goes along with it, okay, but it gives us the opportunity to adapt and evolve over time. Where it gets tricky is, as you preface the question, saying, if you're not comfortable, then you don't have to participate. And I think that's where it gets tricky, when we start to make that conversation uncomfortable. And it really shouldn't be. It really shouldn't be. But that's my reaction.
Thank you, Ellen.
You know, to add to what Alex said, Alex. You know, I think you heard me say I've never heard of Mitchell. Learning my history was important, and I'm still learning. I don't know it all yet. Every day I think I learn a little bit more. Even in this play, I've learned some things. But I think our ancestors were ashamed to talk about it. I think they felt uncomfortable to talk about it. But again, we didn't know what questions to ask. The conversations were never had at the dinner table or in the field when we were working. So how we knew what questions to ask. And it wasn't until I got older that I was able to ask the questions and learn a little bit about who I was and where we came from. So I feel comfortable sitting at this table now. I didn't feel comfortable being in certain situations. I've come a long way as a person here on Hilton Head being comfortable fighting and advocating for this community, in which I didn't feel like I had a seat at the table before. And I'm on several boards, committees, etc. right now. Overworked, but I'm doing my part, I feel, to make this community a better community. So thank you.
So I would say that the trauma that slavery and enslavement produced probably made our ancestors stronger. I'll go back to the resourcefulness because that was the point I had under this question. Because I think while there was trauma there, it brought strength because they felt they had to keep going and keep moving. But in their keeping going, they had to, they suppressed a lot. And so therefore, things like Mitchellville weren't talked about. The Gullah language wasn't passed down to my generation, you know. I routinely will go and sit with my Aunt Regina Ragland because she has so much history from, you know, for our family. And when I need answers, that's who I typically go to. So in sitting with her recently, she said, Mama and them didn't talk about slavery, you know, and when she's talking about Mama, she's talking about her grandmother, actually. And because, that just wasn't something that needed to be talked about. It was something you wanted to sweep under the rug. Those were bad times. We're in good times. Let's just keep going forward. So it wasn't comfortable for them, and that discomfort now has caused some of the history, I think, to be lost. But whether you're uncomfortable or comfortable, we have to have the uncomfortable conversations. So even if you are uncomfortable, I think it's good that you're uncomfortable sometimes, but you get past that discomfort by talking about it. Sitting on certain boards and, organizations and being, not being an elder, sometimes I feel the most uncomfortable because I'm not sure I'm accurately representing my culture, or to my best ability. So I think most of my discomfort comes from hoping I don't get, chastised by any elder for saying something wrong. And that's why I would need to be educated. Everyone needs to be educated. So, it's a strength in that trauma.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, so. I want to say this because it's something that I've been thinking about, wrote about recently, and I think it's kind of related to your answers and the question. In our country, we always elevate survivalists. We are really happy and proud when somebody, like in the recent earthquake, we are really excited that somebody survived underground for 8 days or more. We're really proud and happy when someone, I saw a story where someone who was, I think he was blind, and he wanted to be a mountain climber. And I think somehow they were getting him up the mountain. That makes us proud. So survival, heroism, pride. That's kind of an American value. But it occurred to me when I was writing about slavery, thinking about enslaved people, why isn't their survival considered heroic? Yes. And I think that is connected to why you don't know your history. Because it goes back to what I said before about power, control, the narrative, who controls the narrative. Because if you control the story, you determine what's in it and what's not in it. That's the way it works. So I think in my mind, and I don't know how this will happen, maybe only in my writing, in my little mind, how do we make the story of slavery and survivors of slavery heroes? And so not being traumatized by it, not being afraid to talk about slavery and to turn it into a story of our heroism in spite of attempts to demonize and dehumanize us. I think that's the challenge. I think that's the challenge. And I think it's particularly important because we are, and I think Alex referred to the future a minute or two ago, why that's important. We need to make the future different, and the whole idea of slavery, we have to address it. And I, as a teacher, I started teaching 7th grade English, and I'm still alive and fairly sane. But, see, now I forgot my point. All right. So I'm gonna, we never put a time on this, but I'm gonna kind of be respectful here. So I'm going to skip to another question for Lauren and Caesar. Is there a message in this play? If so, what is it? And I'm going to combine that with another question I had down here. What do you want the audience to walk away with? When they walk out of the theater, what do you want them to take with them? Either of you.
I'll start. The message of the play to me is quite simple. I think all of us as human beings want to be able to have self-determination. We all want to name ourselves. We all want to be seen. We all want to dictate how we are seen. I don't care who you are. The idea that someone misunderstands you or calls you out your name or sees you in a way that you do not see yourself is hurtful and painful and traumatic. And so this is a story about people who are waiting to be able to name themselves instead of being named by someone else. And so I hope everybody walks out and understands the importance of that fact for themselves. I don't care where you are in your life, what color you are, religion doesn't matter. There's something unique and quite likely mercurial about you that you would like everyone to know. And so I hope that everybody leaves the theater feeling that. As far as my overall feeling, I say the same prayer before every production. I hope that something happens in that room that glorifies God. And that's it.
I mean, I think going off of that, one of the things that always strikes me is in studying drama and all this stuff, human desire is very simple. Freedom, love, family, but the accomplishment in getting there is what makes our history complex. Especially for people who were brought here on ships, enslaved, as well as people who immigrated here voluntarily on ships, as well as people who are walking across the Rio Grande right now. The desires are always the same few things, and then the twists and turns are what culture and society puts up in achieving having your own name, having your own freedom, being able to take care of your family. The survivalist instinct that people have. I do recall a lot of, at least my grandparents, after going into crypto-converso Jewish culture and studying that and interviewing people, and it was like pulling teeth to just get people to open up, because a lot of that was wrapped in like pain and like, let's just move on. And so when I went back home to Florida, I sat down and I was like, oh, tell me about the past. Tell me about your childhood. And once again, it was like pulling teeth. It was like, come on, like a fight happened of just getting them to open up. And I did not know the right question to ask. I just, plopped down, like, tell me your history. People don't know how to handle it. Like, what? Like, that's a huge question. Tell me who you are is a huge question. Simple, but it's a huge question for any culture, for any person. And so what I saw was my grandparents and my aunts were like, okay, tomorrow, later, let me get myself together. And one by one, each one of them passed away. One by one. Wait a minute, when I get it right, I'll tell it to you. Each one passed away. So now with my mom, I will be like, tell me something you remember immediately, small, a moment. And this is in the middle of a pandemic, so we have a lot of time. That quarantine thing. And she would, I wouldn't say, tell me your history. I would say, tell me this. And then she was able to explain growing up in Winsboro, South Carolina, and her grandmother, and the little things that she would do, and the 5 jobs she had, laundress, as well as doing things for other families, as well as concocting moonshine, potions, all these things, and then coming down to Miami, and then being in these projects and doing the same thing, having a closet with moonshine. She sells neighbors, concoctions, working a job as, seamstress, laundry, working as a maid, and that sort of juggling multiple things. And the first thing, when she arrived in Miami in these projects, she was like, I have to get some land. I have to. I am not going to stay in this apartment. And that first moment of being able to buy that house, being able to buy that bigger lot, then renting out the second part of the house, the side house, and becoming a landlord. And that constant need to like expand, while at the same time, a little bit of that reticence to share. You're like, tell me about yourself. It's like, I don't have time, let's just work. And now trying to honor that past in the story while making the time for the history, so that more of it doesn't fade away. And so listening to people, adding to this, continuing to see this grow throughout as people tell me things, as I hear things, because this will hopefully live and breathe and continue on.
I want to say that this is bringing up a lot for me because I have someone in my family also made moonshine. Anybody?
Not the Campbell family. Right.
All right, so I'm going to ask if anyone wants to make any final comments, because some of the subsequent questions I had, we've sort of touched on them differently. So I'm not going to retread ground that we've already gone over. But does anybody want to make any final comments? Since you have an opportunity, Alex? Alex?
I'm Herb about to pass the vice. Herbie's the older.
Treat me like I'm an old man.
We just told you 56.
Yeah, I wanted to really show gratitude to everyone that showed up today. As I look amongst the crowd, I see a lot of faces that I recognize. I see a lot of new faces. And for the new faces, I guess it's a Gullah trait too. Every time I get an opportunity to talk, I gotta tell a story. We think about that, Dr. Louise. That's all right. Still back. I found myself in a lot of rooms, and a lot of times I'm in rooms like this one where I am definitely in a minority. And folks start to tell the story about how they came to Hilton Head and how they vacationed here for X amount of years and decided to move once they retired. And when it's my turn, my story is a little different. I tell them that my people were brought over here on a ship. Not by choice. But that's okay. And I want to say that I am more than comfortable in this room. And I appreciate your interest in Mitchelville and in the Gullah culture. I'd also want to share, and Mr. Ford, they try to pull my coattail here a little bit, but that's okay. We all know the story of Mitchelville. There was a gate at the entrance of Mitchelville. Okay? They were training Africans how to live in they could say a capitalistic society. Okay? So there was a gate of protection there. So I'm gonna argue that Mitchelville was the first gated community.
Any other final words?
No final words, but since Councilman Brown brought up the fact that Mitchelville is in the thrust of a major national campaign, I have my hat here, baby. Anybody want to issue some checks here to help us with the campaign of Pittsburgh Steelers? Oh, God.
You know what, Herbie? You just hurt the contribution. Your hands.
Herbie is definitely gonna get the award at the board meeting next month as the best board member.
And I think I forgot to mention that Mr. Ford is a member of the Mitchellville
Exactly.
Board as well.
I'm still looking for money though.
So I'm gonna do a final transition, and if the board, not the board, but the panel is okay with it, I will, allow just a few minutes for questions. If any of you want to ask a question to the board, please try to project so that everyone can hear it. Yes.
Are you going to be filming this so that we can use it in our schools?
Good question. I think it is.
Are we filming the play?
Yes.
We are filming the play, but I do not think unions will allow us to distribute it to local schools, but we do have, in concert with the Office of Cultural Affairs, a free student matinee that's being offered.
Oh, well, that's very dangerous.
Okay. Question, yes.
I'm assuming, I don't know, you guys have kids, and maybe even a couple of grandkids. How are you passing this message on to them, and so they understand with their history? Because they're gonna have to live through this, they're gonna have to probably encounter a lot of different things too.
I'll start with that one. As I have two kids, I have a daughter who is 18 and is at Howard University now.
I heard that, Howard. There's a Howard student in the cast.
Oh my gosh. She's a freshman at Howard. And then my son, who's a junior at May River High School. I can tell you that everything that my wife and I do is intentional to teach them our history, our culture. Everywhere I go, and my kids are with me, I introduce them to whoever's in the room. I encourage them, and they encourage me to also continue to learn our history. My daughter is probably the biggest one. She's the advocacy person of the family. By all means, she is crazy about history and about culture and about advocating for what's right, what's wrong for all. So I take that question as, I think and my wife and I have set the foundation. I think we have done a great job, but we're continuing to do that as well with them by taking them places, showing them things, putting them in environments. If she was here today in Hilton Head, she would be at this meeting. My son, if he was in the school as well. So everywhere I go and everything I'm a part of, I make sure my kids are a part of it.
That's such an important question. What are we doing for the children? One of the things I would say to you, and I found this in my own experience as a teacher, some African American students, children, don't want to talk about slavery. They'd rather push it under the table. In my opinion, that goes back to the trauma. But it also, in my opinion, is connected to the way we politicize the whole idea of history. Because that's what the society is trying to do, kind of push that under the table. So those hard conversations, we're not supposed to have them. It has a different effect on white children if we don't talk about history than it does on black children. So if you're a Gullah child and you're in Hilton Head High School in the middle school or May River or somewhere in St. Helena, and you're in 7th or 8th grade, when it's time to talk about history, I don't want to talk about slavery. Well, guess what? To me, that's part of the trauma. I think it's part of the trauma, it's part of the problem. From my vantage point, it's part of what we have to do to re-educate ourselves, to push back maybe on these ideas of hiding history or, pushing it off the table. Because some people are being hurt by that. And as a teacher who loved, most of the time, teaching 7th graders, it matters what we tell them while they're young. And I am all about having a future where our children are in a much better place than we are right now. So, any other questions? Yes. Yes. What?
We haven't finished the answer.
Okay. I'm sorry. Ellen, I'm sorry.
No worries. I guess I was trying to get some,
Can't hear.
sure, that's not common. Some clarity on the question, but I think I've got it now. And I would just offer that let's not think that there has to be a different way of teaching or honoring or respecting when it comes to raising Gullah children than any others. Okay? And one key component I think is education, and I think that's something that we all hold a responsibility. Not just within a household. I understand that Mitchelville worked for a while on a curriculum that had been presented to Beaufort County School District. I understand that there are other school districts within the nation that are considering this whole idea of African American studies being a high school study. So there's opportunity, I think, that we all hold a certain responsibility to make sure that this story continues to be alive. But what I will say is that we have to make sure that that whole idea of staying with the times through education is important, okay? I can speak very freely that when I was going through the school system, I by no means was the smartest black person in the school. But many that went to school with me didn't get an opportunity to display how smart they were, because at that point you still had two, in my opinion, languages going on, okay? And thankfully today, Spanish-speaking folks have a little extra help to get there. And that was not available when we were coming through school, okay? And nor is it available right north of the Broad in Beaufort County, where a lot of folks are still speaking Gullah, and they're going to school, and the teachers are not being able to relate, okay? So the whole idea of educating, making sure that folks get a proper education so they can sustain themselves through life, I think is a very important piece to how we move forward. So I think education as a whole, and education in the household, are responsibilities as far as keeping this culture and the history upon us. Yep.
And there's more. South Carolina. So I'd say that one of the things that makes me happiest about being back on Hilton Head and living here is that I have a 10-year-old son that I can share my culture up in front, like right there where he can touch it, rather than living in another state or city and having to paint a picture for him. He can see it. I'm really proud that he's growing up where he can go to an event at Mitchelville. He can go to Juneteenth, he can go, to Freedom Day. And like Galen says, I try to take him to as many of those events and things as possible so that he just, gets a feel and a sense of the importance of knowing the culture and carrying it forth. You talk about land, Alex, or Alec, he he says to me, whenever he sees someone like come onto my mom and dad's property, he's like, who is that person? What are they doing on our property? You know? And I'm like, whoa, okay, you know. But he learned that from my father, you know, and it's just so beneficial that he was able to spend time with him, you know, face to face, and learn that plus other things that I had no idea that he had even learned. I'm learning even after my father's death that he's learned all these things and traditions, and that's the way that we make sure that our children carry it on. We have to keep telling the stories and telling them what's important.
Thank you. I think I have no more time. I have just been reminded that the director and the playwright have work to do. And they need a break before they started. Let me just, remind you, the play runs from March 16th through the 26th at Main Street Theater. At least 2, probably closer to 3 of the 8 performances are sold out. If you're interested in tickets, I would suggest that you not wait, that you purchase them. Please join me in giving this fabulous